It's only been about a week since the Set 14 Cyber City launch, but already the meta has shaken up completely, and what was really OP is now kind of unplayable. So because there's so much changes to the TFT Academy tier list, we wanted another video just to help you get up to speed on what the meta is. So let's dive right in and find out what are the best comps and how exactly do they work. To enter this video, I want to give you a good brief overview of the first item that you should be thinking about slamming every single game. The first that I think everyone's going to be looking for is Infinity Edge. Infinity Edge gives you access to pretty much every powerful forecast in the game, and a couple of other really nice things like a Cypher loot streak with Zed Draven, which is going to be the first comp that we talk about. The ceiling of Infinity Edge is really high, but the downside is you don't really get to play that many reroll compositions. So if you slam Infinity Edge, you're pretty much not going to reroll, except I guess for Shaco, but we're not even going to talk much about that right now. The second item that almost everyone is really excited to slam is Ginsu's Rageblade. This does allow you to play for some reroll compositions, and it gives you access to a couple of forecasts, but the trade-off is you don't get to play as many forecasts, so it feels like you have to play around Zeri or Aphelios, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. If you want to be open, Jack of all trades, master none, slam a Spear of Shojin, which gives you openings to a lot of compositions, but you're going to need a lot more power behind it. Shojin is going to be a nice item to have, but it won't single-handedly win you a lot of fights. It's just kind of a good combo enabler for some other items. And so you can always slam this if you don't know what to play. The gaps between these tiers are actually smaller than represented. I do think that, for example, Anima Squad can still hang with some of these comps. It's just that these comps in the B tier are much more conditional and require something extra powerful to keep up with the A tier. And then the A tier is actually quite consistent, but S tier has the opportunity to blow out the entire lobby if all their stars align. There's almost no counterplay to some of the S tier comps when they have everything going. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into the comps and find out what exactly is good. Cypher Draven Reroll Cash Out is the strongest comp in the game currently and is winning the most amount of lobbies at high elo. If you start with Cypher at the beginning of the game, you lose every fight you possibly can by positioning badly or just taking good losses, and then you lose streak all the way to the end of stage 3, cash out at 3-7, transition to roll for Draven 3. Most of the time you're rolling for Draven 3 on 8, and you look for a 4 Bastion, 3 Cypher setup with Zeri as your duo. Best in slot Draven is Shojin, Infinity Edge, and some kind of damage amp. So in this case, Guard Breaker complements Infinity Edge, but you can go Giant Slayer. If you don't have anti-heal, you can put Red Buff onto Draven as well. That is a little bit less damage, so if you do that, you kind of have to go for really good Zed items. And then you pick a duo carry between Draven, Senna, and Zeri. Zed is the most reliable, mainly because ideally you're playing around cash out already, so you already have the Cypher units in. But if you have a really good Exotech item, like the ones we talked about in my previous video around the Exotech, you can play for Zeri as a duo. And then, of course, you can always play Senna if you go for Senna 3. This is just if you're very, very rich and you're just stuck rolling on 8 for a long time. If you are rolling on 8, ideally you go for Sejuani as your tank, but I've also seen people go for Galio 3 as well, and even just play for like 3-cost reroll. But either way, you need Draven 3 plus some kind of duo. And because you have a lot of extra items, if you have Thief's Gloves, throw them on Zed or Renekton, or maybe even some other of the 3-star units. One augment I really want to shout out is Hostile Takeover. This is actually a complete reversal of how you play the loot streak cash out. Hostile Takeover says you actually want to win streak. Deersoap has played this a handful of times, and he believes it's one of the best trait augments in the game because it gives you the Draven and you can start win streaking immediately. But I wouldn't take Hostile Takeover if you don't already have the 2 other Cypher units to start off with. If you do have your loot streak snapped because people are positioning badly, then you probably will have to just restart your loss streak and take a lower cash out. But that's actually okay because let's take a look at the tables real quick. If you look at the Cypher Wars tables, the first major breakpoint that you really care about is around 225, because then you can start getting things like Support Anvil and Artifact, and those are really, really powerful big swings because you can get a really good Artifact for Zed, you can get a good support item that can really support the Draven. Things like Zeke's, Locket, Aegis can all be really, really nice, and that ends up being a really powerful amount of resources. This is basically like a gold tier augment. Interestingly enough, 250 actually feels worse, especially if you get offered things like, 2 Dr. Mundos and 2 Alistars. What do you actually want to do with some of these cash outs? And then at 290, you get like a prismatic worth of power. You get Masterwork upgrade, you get a rating item, you get Artifact as well. Although this is a lot worse, Champion duplicated forecast. And then at 330, you kind of get some weird stuff again, where maybe you just get, 2-star more, 2-star Fiddle, 2-star Shyvana, 2-star Veigar, 2-star Zyra. And that's a lot of gold, maybe a board that you can build with. But I much rather have a rating item or the ability to have a masterwork upgrade and choose what rating item I have. And if you just continue to look at this table, the whole point that I'm trying to get at is there's actually some breakpoints that are not very good. And I'm probably going to make a full video of this eventually to talk about how to play Cypher in depth. But the point I'm trying to get at is it's not that big of a deal to actually have your lose streak snap. Just take whatever cash out you can get at 3-7. If you really hate it, you can push it to 4-3. But for the most part, you just take it and then roll for the Draven after that. Zed generally wants to be positioned in the front center areas because when he's here, he generally is going to target the top left. And then if he's in Jax's spot, he'll generally target the top right. So just keep that in mind. You want Zed to jump onto the back line ASAP. The second composition S tier we need to talk about is Nitro Flex. And Nitro has so many variations. It's probably going to take the biggest section of the video. Nitro is a lot like Black Rose if you played the previous set from Into the Arcane, where it's a summon trait that you only play 3-4 units of, and the other half of your composition can just be a bunch of different packages that you slot in. The interesting thing about Nitro as well is that you also don't have to re-roll the trait. So in the previous version of this tier list that we did before the A patch, they actually nerfed Nitro right before it, and so we thought it was going to be really good. And this version ended up being okay, but nothing amazing. And that's because they nerfed it right before launch, like a few hours before it. And this is a version where you chase Shyvana 3, Nidalee 3, Kindred 3. We talked about it last time. But now what people are choosing to do instead is just play 2-star Nitro and then push levels and then keep that Nitro in as a way to basically plant your front line and then build a package around it. In this case, the most common package you'll see is Exotech Zeri. You essentially look for a strong Exotech item like Flux Capacitor Pulse Stabilizer for Zeri. You add some Rage Blades to it, and then you use the fact that you have a bunch of free summoned power through the robot, and then you have an extra free item for Exotech to just get a huge tempo advantage, and you play for like a solid top 2, top 3. And the crazy thing about it is that it actually naturally builds into the best 5 cost in the game, which is Aurora. If you have items for Aurora and you get Aurora 2, you can win almost any lobby. With the exception of maybe the Cypher Draven board, you probably won't beat that one. And so you don't actually hold on to extra Kindreds and Shyvanas and Elise and Nidalees after you 2-star them. You simply sell them and you level and you just keep Nitro in, stacking that robot over and over. This version that we're showing plays 4 Bastion around Renekton and Galio, but you can slot in anyone you really want. You can play, Zach Garen as just generic 5 costs. You can play 5 Exotech if you hit Jax and something else. You can also lean into more Dynamo as well, and I believe that's another variation that we can actually show here, which is 4 Dynamo Nitro. And the really interesting about this variation is that it actually uses very similar items to Jhin for the Jhin Nitro Reroll. So what you could do, for example, is look for Jhin, show Jhin Infinity Edge. I want to reroll. So what you could do is start off angling for some Nitro Jhin reroll, have Shojin Infinity Edge and a good Exotech item, and then eventually realize that you're in a better spot to play for Misfortune. Maybe you hit Misfortune pair and you have Jhin 2 and no other copies of Jhin. You're like, this is not working out. Just keep those Nitro units in and then just play Misfortune, level, and play Dynamo instead. So you have a little bit of that flexibility. And that's ultimately what makes Nitro really powerful. It's very dynamic. You have a lot of outs, and everyone in the lobby can actually play it. I know this is going to sound crazy, but I'm pretty sure if you see 6 people in the lobby playing Nitro as part of their package, that's actually okay, because all you guys really need is 2-star Shyvana, 2-star Elise, 2-star Kindred, and variations thereof. And if there's 25 copies of Shyvana and 30 copies of Kindred, there's plenty to go around. So you might end up seeing a situation where it feels like everyone in the lobby is playing Nitro in the one game, but the backline and how you package it is completely different. There is one variation that I want to also talk about, which is Nitro Amp, and you play around Annie. I think this is actually one of the more consistent ways to play Annie currently. And so you could be in a spot where you slam Shojin, and you were originally looking for Nitro Dynamo or Nitro Jhin, and trying to play something else. And then you get hit with tier, rod, and you're like, oh my god, I can't play around Misfortune with these items. What am I supposed to do? You can try and play around Annie, and instead of selling Nidalee, you keep Nidalee because she's an amp unit, and you connect Annie with Nidalee, and then use that to anchor yourself. And you can like mix and match in multiple ways there as well, but this is like one suggested way that you could cap out the board. And there's a lot of different ways that you can go about it. So if there's one line that I recommend for you to one trick this patch, if you just really want to learn like one comp tree and master it, I would suggest Nitro because there's so much to offer. And just by the virtue of the fact that you're open to playing multiple carries with multiple different items and different augment setups will help you improve a lot as a player. So I recommend this heavily if you are a player looking to one trick something. The last of the top tier comps that you're going to be seeing a lot is Rengar, Big Cat Energy. You're going to see Rengar dominate a lot of lobbies with Executioners. And it's funny because Rengar actually got nerfed for the B patch. They actually reduced some of his damage because Riot actually predicted and anticipated that Rengar would be a problem, especially when you nerf things like Strategists, which were one of the highest win rate comps, and blowing up Rengar. Rengar now feasts on a bunch of other backline carries. If you're playing Ophelio Zaya or you're playing Misfortune, just be very mindful that Rengar is going to jump on your backline carry and kill you, and you will rage, and you will queue up again, hoping that it goes differently, and it won't go differently at all. The number one thing to remember at Rengar is that it's a really expensive comp. Even though you're just looking for Rengar 3 and we say it's a Rengar comp, just like anything in the set right now, you need a duo carry. And so rolling for Varus 3 and Rengar 3 is very expensive in this Executioner line. And you also kind of want Vex as well. And you kind of want items for all of them. It's kind of hard to get so many items. In fact, that's why you see like no utility and defensive items on Nico and Echo, because you just need every component slotted towards offense. That's just one variation of Rengar. There's actually another variation that's starting to pop up around Street Demons instead, and you reroll Rengar and Jinx. Then you give like leftover items, either frontline to Nico or extra AP to Bran, and you can cap around Samira and Viego and some of the other usual 5 costs. Both of these variations, very, very pricey, so make sure you have a lot of econ. But perhaps the most important thing to focus on with Rengar is the fact of how insane he is with artifacts. Prowler's Claw, Silvermere Dawn are 2 amazing, amazing artifacts on him. And then these other ones, Death-Defiance, Spectral Cutlass, Mittens, Infinity Force, are also really good as well. Rengar is the ultimate artifact carry holder. If you're on artifact Anvil start, it should be the #1 thing that you're thinking about, opening up and see if you can play a Rengar spot. Chances are, though, you will be contested, so keep that in mind. That also means that Portable Forge and Living Forge are going to be good for those very same reasons. And yes, if you're thinking about it, multiple artifacts are insane on Rengar. So if you get things like Silvermere Dawn and Prowler's Claw, oh my god, mwah, chef's kiss. It's just, you're going to destroy everything. The last thing I want to note is that Rengar actually increases his hex range radius with every single cast. And so you want to kind of position him close-ish to the center. You don't have to put him like dead center, but what ends up happening here is Rengar jumps within 2 hexes to the lowest health enemy. So in this case, let's say that it's going to jump somewhere like here in the middle. But then his hex race increases to 3. And then when he casts again, it'll increase to 4, and so on and so forth. So that means that when he hops in the middle here, he's most likely to hop into the back corner because of the lowest health enemy. And then if he attacks the lowest health enemy in the corner and he leaps again, that enemy is still the lowest health enemy. So he's actually going to snipe and assassinate the carry that way. So that's why you kind of leave him in the center. If you put him on the far right or on the far left, there's a possibility that your opponent's enemy carry is going to be on the exact opposite corner. So if you put Rengar here where Viego is, and let's say the enemy Brand and Ziggs in the top left, then Rengar is going to take 3 casts to get there, which can be really difficult. And that's assuming he even does get there. He might target back to the front line during the skirmish. So Rengar generally better left in the center there. Moving on over to the A tier, these are comps that are really powerful, and if the stars align and they get all of their top end power, can actually compete with the S tier comps. It's just a little bit weaker, so you're much more aiming for like a top 3, top 4, as opposed to a top 2, top 1. The first is Exotech Zeri, which is a composition I actually just went over. It was a tech that China was popularizing even before the B patch landed, and was starting to be a way for people to farm consistent top 4s during the Fast 9 open fort meta. It's anchored around the fact that you get so many free Exotech items, and because of that, you'll naturally win streak. And you can also pile on a bunch of stats with the Exotech trait. Every single item you equip with Exotech is kind of like adding a cybernetic bulk to that unit. And so even if you have just 3 items on Mordekaiser with like Corrupted Chassis, a Crown Guard, and a single component, you don't even, by the way, have to put the full item there. You can just put like a cloak and you get some Exotech value. Then all of a sudden, this Mordekaiser is like 2400 HP and so difficult to chew, and he stuns, and that also applies to Neferian Jax. And so for that reason, if you get things like Buried Treasures, if you get Binary Airdrop, if you get things like Cyber Deck, which gives you a bunch of extra free items, it can just be an overwhelming amount of HP and advantage. It reminds me a lot of Scrap, if you remember from Scrap for previous sets, where the more items you have on your team, the more power you get as a team. It's very similar in that vein. This is a trait that scales off of the number of items you have. So for that very reason, this is the trait tracker comp of the set. If you have trait tracker and you're comfortable with it, go for trait tracker, get out 6 emblems, and even if you don't have the best emblems, just throw the non-useful ones on Jax and the Fury, and just let them get a bunch of stats. The usual sign to go for Exotech is when you have Flux Capacitor in any of the 3 items, or if you just have really good Exotech starts, you know, something like Trial Run is just almost too good to ignore, even if you don't have the best versions of it. And in general, you can go for double Rageblade or Rageblade Gunblade on Zeri. Both are very, very good. I made a whole video going through it as well as using some top seeing gameplay, so go check it out, the Chinese Exotech Guide. Misfortune is probably one of the most unoptimized carries in the game right now. I think even just a week or 2 into the set, she is understood to be very powerful, but I think a lot of people, one, don't really understand even what her true best items are. 2, people don't really know what is the best optimal build to go around her. And so what you have is a lot of people playing 2 Dynamo, 3 Syndicate, and ranging that all the way to 4 Dynamo, 5 Syndicate, playing with a bunch of values in between. Is it, 2 Dynamo, just Aurora, Misfortune, Braum, Darius? Is it 5 Syndicate, and then you like max the power of Misfortune with Braum, but Braum's not exactly a good tank? Is it 3 Dynamo, because you're not really exactly happy to play Morgana? She's just a 1 cost that adds a little bit of AP that doesn't even do anything for Misfortune. So maybe it's 3 Dynamo instead, and then you trio carry. And then maybe you're looking for like Garen or Zac or Renekton. So there's just like so many different things you can do. And that's why this guide might not have that much written in, because it's just to help give you an idea of what the board can be built around in order to get you level 9 and ultimately cap around Misfortune and Aurora. The most important thing you can take away is that Misfortune wants a bunch of damage items. She doesn't want Rageblade. She wants what Xayah has, like Infinity Edge, Guardbreaker, Giant Slayer, Deathblade. Shojin is a very debated item right now because you technically get mana through Dynamo, so do you need Shojin? But then people say Misfortune has a 150 mana cast. You're telling me she doesn't want Shojin at all? She's going to take forever to cast again. And then people say, well, if you do cast twice, you're going to blow everything up. You might as well have more AD. So there's a bunch of debate around there. What's not debated is 3-item Aurora, especially Aurora 2, can close out the game. So Misfortune by herself is cool, but she's going to need extra help. Get Aurora online. Have Elise hold the items until you get to Aurora, and you'll be very impressed. Elise can actually do a lot of damage. And then just throw whatever frontline makes sense. Darius is a bruiser, so you can play a Kabuko, for example, and tie that in the late game. Braum Leona, or just Braum Rost plus anything else, like Braum Rost, and then go for Zac, go for Garen with Vanguard, so on and so forth. Very, very good. I think we talked about this last time, but I do think that Misfortune is one of the best Bronze for Life users because you can pretty much justify breaking down all of this, what we said. Like, if you just play 2 Dynamo, 3 Syndicate, 2 Vanguard, 2 Bruiser. From there, you can mix and match a bunch of other units, like 3 unit packages that adds 3, 4, 5 traits. So I've played Misfortune with like 10 plus traits before, and it felt really, really good. Twisted Fate Reroll is pretty much the bar of where A tier comps are. It's like a solid comp. It's going to be represented a lot. It's going to be played a lot. It's going to look solid, but it's also not terribly impressive at the highest level. It doesn't win many lobbies, and a lot of things need to go right for you to get into a good Twisted Fate spot. The first is that you really need to have like a Rageblade almost like ready to go immediately on a Twisted Fate. It's kind of hard to say, I have a Rod, I have 1 Twisted Fate, and I'm going to try to go get that bow. Bow is so contested currently in the metagame. So if you don't already have that or a way to guarantee it through Pandora's items or a component start, it's going to be very tricky. So you kind of need to have a good specific spot for Twisted Fate. But that being said, it's rock solid. You get it, you get your top 3, top 4, and you can even get a top 2. The way you win with this composition is to hit very early. You don't care about who you really 3-star as your front line. Darius is just the easiest because you're rolling for a 2-cost Twisted Fate already. So Darius is another 2-cost you can roll for. But Braum is probably a better 3-star tank to put the second Syndicate hat on. But then late stage of the game, you can actually make Misfortune your kingpin. I think we have to update this. This might be slightly out of date, but in the late stage of the game, like end of stage 5, where Twisted Fate usually kind of struggles, you probably want to put damage items onto Misfortune because you want a duo carry, and then you make Misfortune the second Kingpin. That's after you finish your upgrades. The other thing worth noting is that 7 Syndicate is a pretty reliable win condition for Twisted Fate. So definitely worth chasing if you can get 2 Syndicate emblems. Also, Anger Issues is a really good augment for this composition. At least that's what the stats say. If you load up Twisted Fate and you put 7 Rage Blades in the stats, it says that's pretty good. So give it a try. Street Demon Strategists, aka Strategists, are back in the metagame, and it's basically what the Annie Strategist board was, but you just play Brand instead. It looks pretty eerily similar, actually, to the Annie board. Let's go ahead and scroll down here. Yeah, basically, you just play Brand and Zyra instead of Annie Yumi, and we even have the same exact positioning. The core build is based around Nico, Brand, Zyra, Ziggs, and then you play more Echo plus any other support. So a lot of times you play Dr. Mundo, for example, before Kabuko, and then you play maybe a 6th or 7th Street Demon just to get you to 9. But the composition really needs Brand, and the composition also really wants a duo carry in Ziggs. You don't want to actually play this comp if you can only itemize Brand and 1 tank. You really want to have a AP duo carry of some sort. For that reason, I would recommend taking some item augments. They're pretty solid in this composition. I'd also say that Ziggs is probably the more reliable duo carry, but I've seen people do a bunch of other ones in the back to try and make it work. And you basically have Nico hold items for Kabuko, Zyra holds items for Brand and Ziggs, and then you always play Viego for the most part because Viego's nuts. Give Viego leftover items. Once you find Kabuko, move items over to Kabuko. And of course, positioning will change every game, so just make sure you adjust accordingly. I want to give a shout out to Manazane and Sniper's Focus Brand. I think a lot of people understand that Sniper's Focus is really good on Brand because when he does his big AoE explosion, the units that take damage on the very outer ends end up getting way more damage bursted onto them. So Brand is actually quite sick with this artifact. Don't sleep on it. Oh, and the final thing about itemization is that the reality is it's really hard to get, exactly these items. So just pretty much focus on Brand and give your secondary leftovers. So Ziggs can hold red buff, Shiv, Giant Slayer, Archangels, Adaptive Helm, even a blue buff. It's not great, but you just have to slam whatever you can. Just get the duo carry items. Don't try to agree too hard on it. Anima Squad has lost a step or two, and it's definitely weaker, but it's still good. And it just depends on whether or not you can get to Aurora. I think we're starting to see a theme of what the patch is right now, which is all paths lead to capped 5-cost AP AoE. Aurora is insane. Viego is insane. If you play comps that play both of them, they're insane. You can see that we recommend playing Viego on 9 for Anima Squad. And that allows you to actually play for a Seraphine with the Viego for the Techie. And Techie is definitely not something to be slept on because Techie as a trait helps you nerf your opponent's damage by 10%. So it's very powerful. But pretty much plays the same way as before, which is you focus on a combination of Xayah and Aurora items early, and you want to focus on Leona as your main tank. One of the main innovations that we saw in the line over the past week since launch is that Leona actually really wants 3 true tank items. You don't actually really want to put Sunfire or Spark or Even Shroud on Leona. And the reason why is because those are support utility items. They give you some defensive stats, but its main focus is on its aura ability. And so by prioritizing things like Morello on Aurora and relying on Last Whisper on Xayah, you get to have Leona have true tank items. And what that does is when you play Anima Squad, you choose a weapon that procs every few seconds. The longer Leona stays alive, the more activations of Anima Squad weapons are going to be able to fire and trigger. So it's one of those things where by prioritizing a true tank Leona, you actually make your trait perform a lot better. The dual carry of this comp is actually just the weapons itself. So build real tank items on Leona. Don't just go Sunfire, Even Shroud, Redemption, and then just be like, whoa, why am I losing every fight? Make a very tanky Leona. Special shout out to Bramblevest on Leona. There's just so many people trying to play Nitro Misfortune or play Zeri and Exotech or even just the Draven, Rengar, and this Bramblevest is a lifesaver. So make that Bramblevest and worry about the rest later. So yeah, that's Anima Squad. It's definitely a composition that's still solid in the B tier and probably one of the best B tier comps to play for, but it's also something that is noticeably a step down over the others. All right, let's talk about Fiddlesticks. Fiddlesticks is very popular in China. In fact, a lot of people in China and Asia Pacific rate this as an S tier comp. And we have it at the top of B tier alongside Anima because we feel like that's where its baseline performance is when you don't have the amazing conditions for it. The amazing conditions are having a Blooding Jewel or having a Sniper's Focus. Those are his two best artifacts. It transforms this into an S tier composition. In fact, we'll probably just write it. Turns into S tier if you have the artifacts. The problem is that it's really, really expensive. You need Fiddlesticks 3 and ideally another Bruiser 3-star, and you want to get the Kabuko, cap out with the 5 cost, and you kind of also need to have items for everything, like specific items. You need to have double Archangels, which is, very, very specific, and you need to have an artifact. It's just kind of hard. It's just kind of hard to get it all together. So the consistency factor is where we're kind of rating it at B, but its ceiling is really, really high. The other thing about it is that Fiddlesticks 2 is not as stable as you would hope it would be, even if you have everything set up. Let's say you have 6 Bruiser and Fiddle 2 with Archangels, and, Blooding Jewel. I've seen that composition struggle to get wins consistently in Stage 4 because people roll up with Twisted Fate 3, Darius 3, and you can't kill it fast enough, and they heal back up. Or you roll up into, a Draven cash out, and they just wipe you. So it's just one of those things where Fiddlesticks can actually struggle until you get to Fiddlesticks 3. That's not the case necessarily with Executioners. It feels like even if you have Rengar 2, you're very competitive. It can feel like Fiddlesticks doesn't kill anything up until you hit critical mass. But it is a really powerful comp. Take some econ augments, Rig Shop, Heroic Grab Bag, Shop Glitch, things like that. Really good. Cooking Pot, also really nice to buff the Fiddlesticks or buff another Bruiser like Cho'Gath and Kabuko. Very solid copy if you can get it online. The stats like the end game state a lot. It's just about getting there. That's the hard part. Cyberboss Vayne Reroll. This one feels very much like new high score as like the enabler for it. This augment is really good because new high score gives you a bunch of rewards as well as a Ziggs and a Kabuko if you hit enough damage. This one also feels very item dependent. Blue buff, Nashor's, Gunblade, very important. If you need to replace one item, you can replace Gunblade for a Archangels or a Death Cap or some kind of AP. But for the most part, it feels like you have a lot of flexibility at level 6. You go Veigar, you go Poppy, Shyvana, and then you pretty much play anything you want. Like on 6, I've played 4 Bastions, I've played 4 Techies, I've played Street Demons. So you can pretty much just flex anything all the way up to Kabuko and Viego. It almost feels like this composition is not done because it's like Veigar, Poppy, Shyvana, and then a bunch of gaps with like, what do you play? You go straight to Kabuko, Viego. That's the whole point. You can kind of like slot in whatever you want as long as you get the 4 Cyberboss. That's the key. Special shout out to Manazane Veigar. This artifact is really, really good on him. The other 2 are pretty decent, but low sample size. But Manazane is very, very good. That's the one you want. And it's going to go without saying, but if you're playing a techie board, you want Viego in. This guy is the bee's knees. Slayer Reroll, anchored around Vayne. This is a composition that probably needs to also be updated, where we need to talk about how important it is to have a duo carry for Vayne. Vayne's best in slot is 2 Rage Blades and Ruin's Hurricane. A lot of people like to play it off of Category 5, and they have a Rage Blade setup. You can also play Rage Blade and 2 Runins, but I think that's worse than just playing 2 Rage Blades. You go to 6, you roll for Vayne 3, you're playing 4 Vanguards, Slayers, and just having a good time. But then you start falling off really hard. This feels like Twisted Fate, but the fall off window is sooner. You end up falling off and not able to kill as much unless you're able to set up a duo carry. And the duo carry needs to be Senna 3 or Zed, preferably both. If you can get both online, then you can top 2. That feels like a lot to ask for a 2-cost reroll. So my stock of this is actually starting to fall down. I actually think that this composition is still pretty popular, but I actually predict by in the B patch, most people will start saying that it's not that good. But that being said, really fun comp. And ultimately, it gives you another out for when you slam Rage Blade. And you can't play things like Zeri. And you just don't have an opportunity to play into Twisted Fate. This is another thing you can think about with Rage Blades if you just get a bunch of Vaynes. What's really common is you open up with a bow. You hold the Nitro units. You hold a Twisted Fate. You hold a Vayne. And you see what augments you can get. If you get an augment that's really good for Vayne, things that help the attack speed, things that help the Category 5, so on and so forth, then you can maybe lean into it. But I would probably put this in the bottom half of B tier right now. Speaking of the bottom half of B tier, this is my least favorite 4 cost in the game, which is Aphelios. Aphelios, is it even right to put his face at the forefront of this composition? I feel like Aphelios is just a fraud. I don't even really want to spend too much time talking about it, so let's just quickly break it down. You play 4 Vanguard, you play 4 Marksman. The end. If you're playing Aphelios, you really want double Rageblade because it's very important to stack them up, and you want the 4 Vanguards. But it's just so hard to get online. You need so much resources to stabilize. You level and you roll for Aphelios. You're on Aphelios 1. You can have Aphelios 1, 3 items, Leona 2, and Xayah 2, but then you prioritized Aphelios items, and then you don't have items for Xayah. Xayah has like just a Shojin, and Leona has like 2 items, and you have 3 items Aphelios. Not doing enough. But the ironic thing is you put all these items on Xayah, she casts, she is not able to finish it off herself. She's not really good as the primary lead here. So you can't really justify like leaning into Xayah as well as the primary and expect good mileage. And then you have to contend with the fact that Leona is the most contested 4-cross frontliner alongside Sejuani, and it's just so hard to get online. So I'm not a big fan of this comp. If I could, I would put it in C tier, but obviously it's not. It's just I view it as a C tier comp. But because it's so popularly played and because it's very easy and ultimately it does, you know, get a good top 4 every now and then, it's probably at the low end of B tier, maybe. All right, let's stop talking about comps I don't like. Let's talk about the comps I do like. I love this comp. Strategist Leblanc is actually sleeper for being very, very good. I actually think that this might be secretly one of the best reroll comps in the game if you have the conditions for it. And the conditions are you need something really powerful like Mana Zane on Leblanc. If you're on an artifact start and you have an opportunity to get Leblanc with Mana Zane, you'll see what I mean. The reason why it works really well is because she sends 6 sigils at the very beginning of the fight. Sigil is like a projectile that she shoots. Every time she casts, she sends 1 more sigil. So the Mana Zane gives her 120 mana. So she attacks, casts, and then she's going to cast again, and she's sending 9 sigils, 10 sigils, 11 sigils. And she'll alternate, and she'll just snipe things really quickly. And not only that, her projectile speed is very quick, so her time to kill is very fast. And you just be very pleasantly surprised how much she can get done. So I think that Leblanc Reroll has a ton of potential. I think this is tech that we saw from EU. This is not actually something that's very popular at NA or even APAC. So, you know, shout out to the EU community. They really figured this one out, but it's really underplayed. So if you kind of want some underground tech, try LeBlanc. And she's not even really a contested unit. The hard part about this composition is that it's difficult to get Echo and Nico. But if you can just find a way to somehow band-aid that together and have a front line, it almost doesn't really matter. Just get LeBlanc in, and then you can cap the same usual way. Aurora, Garen gets you a strategist mod is good. Or even just playing more street demon power. Another thing that I have a sneaking suspicion on is that I think this is one of the comps that you should play too much value with, because LeBlanc and Echo are 2 costs that you want to roll for, and you can package a bunch of other 2 costs as well. For example, you can play LeBlanc Echo, and then you could play Shyvana and Alawi for Bastion, and then tie in a Techie through Veigar, and that's 5 2 costs already. And that's an AP package that works pretty well together. Just throw another 2 costs like Ross or something for Divinicore, and you get your free rerolls. So I think that it's a composition that probably can use it really well, but I don't have 100% confirmation yet. Couple other pickup comps that we didn't cover. The first is Divinicore Zed. This is a composition that is still really good, actually. We pegged as the best comp going into launch because it was the best comp on PBE, and then they nerfed it. It's still really solid, but you kind of need to have a specific setup where you need to play around melee items. This is something you could play if you slam Rengar items with like Bloodthirster and Hand of Justice, but you're contested, so you need to pivot. You think about going to Divinicore Zed. The difficulty about this is that Zed is very fickle. He might just explode really easily and die too fast. Or you run into the problem where you just never get your Divinicore online. You never get to Renekton. You can't even get Vex online because executioners are contested. And it feels like you need too much things to go right with like Garen landing exactly the Divinicore mod. So it's a little bit hard to put together, but the potential of it is very high. Definitely keep checking it out. And I'll probably eventually do a full guide on it because I do think that it's a very nuanced comp that requires very particular planning. But the reason why I brought it up is because there's a hero augment that I think is really good. And this is like borderline between S and A tier, is Ross Alter Ego's Hero Augment, where you basically play the same approach as Divinicore Zed, but you just have Rost as the main carry. Zed takes leftover melee, and then you have a backline Slayer. This case, we have Vayne 3, and Vayne 3 only is played because you have Rost as a 2-cost, but realistically, if Vayne reroll is happening, for example, you just probably put items on Senna 3 instead, or just Senna 2, and then you just have like a batch of carries through your team effort. So Divinicore is the best way to play around Rost. Very, very good. And I've seen a lot of these kinds of comps just completely bully people who are not prepared for it. It's important to note that Rost really wants to be on weak sides, so away from the enemy tank, because he will spam cast if he kills. So just make sure that he's not stuck on the main tank ever. Oh, also, the data would suggest there's not much sample size of it, but if you can get Gargantua Resolve with the 2 Titans onto Rost, it actually kind of goes super hard as well. So definitely keep an eye out for that if you can. If this is the case, I would go double Gargantua Resolve plus a Bloodthirster on him. Last but not least, I think that Cease and Desist Vi is also quite solid of a hero augment, because Vi is actually quite a good unit. I believe she is one of the best early games to open with, and this Cease and Desist allows her to get to the back line. She casts to the farthest enemy within 3 hexes, and she can assassinate the back line. Then you just let whatever duo carry in the back work for you. And this duo carry for Vayne pretty much could be anyone. In fact, you can pretty much justify any AD carry. Vayne is a Slayer that ties with Draven, so you can go for Vayne 3. You can also play for Xayah, because Xayah is a Anima squad with Leona and Silas, and then you just throw in another Marksman instead of Garen. You can also play Misfortune. Misfortune is a Syndicate with Braum, and then you can just tie in Braum plus Syndicate and Aurora. And Aurora's an Anima squad that ties in with Leona and Silas. So a lot of different possibilities that you can do. Doesn't really matter. Just get Vi plus some kind of backline duo carry and watch her pummel everything in the back. So there you go. Even though there's the few changes to the patch, a lot has shaken up since that B patch. So felt like it was important to do another full video to give you context of what is the most up-to-date meta rated currently. And of course, if there's any updates, we'll go ahead and update TFT Academy so that you guys can always get the most relevant information. That's it for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.